A very good afternoon and welcome to our today's fire chat around reimagining cross-border worker remittances, a unified and collaborative way. So we all understand that the global remittances have become a major global flow of funds and it is impacting an economy's foreign reserves. It is also impacting and influencing the lives of hundreds and thousands of families across the globe. So, to dig deeper into this aspect, I have with me the expert and the market player, Mr. Pasindu Dharmasiri. He is from the Hayton National Bank, Sri Lanka, and he's heading the global transaction banking. So, welcome, Pasindu.
Thanks a lot, Ruby.
So, Pasindu, let's talk about the global worker remittance, how it's happening.
Yeah.
So, what the statistics say is that the advances in payments, the advances in technology, new rails coming in, right? So, these have been influencing the remittances, the global remittances, in many ways.
Correct.
The objective is to bring down the processing fees. The objective is to make it more faster, more secured and accessible, right? Easy to access. Now, Sri Lanka is also seeing the same trend, right? In the year 2024, we have seen that around it has reached to 6.57 billion, and it is a 10% increase since last year.
Very true.
And in year 2025, this has come to about 4.53 till now, starting January till July. So the pace is very fast, and even innovations are evident, right? So now I just want to ask you, what can you give us a snapshot around the global remittances market in terms of its trend, in terms of
Absolutely.
its size, in terms of the drivers, and then tie it back to Sri Lanka and help us understand how it is influencing the local economy over there, the foreign reserves, and also what is the impact it's creating there in Sri Lanka.
Absolutely, a very timely conversation also, because from a global context, if we consider, I would rather keen on segregating this into primarily the consumer remittances, that is peer-to-peer, and also the corporate side of remittances that happening in between B2B. So we'll be talking about B2B and C2C. Okay. So on the B2B, obviously ISO XML 20022 is shaping up the entire cross-border remittances, which is actually more towards the standards. So in terms of driving volumes, in terms of driving more data also through remittances to give better experience to the customer. Why? In terms of on the B2B context, transaction reconciliation is pretty much important. So from a supply chain standpoint, also from global trade, cross-border trade standpoint, the business entities would want to see why is this transaction either receiving or why is this transaction is going out. As a result, they would want maybe instant money sometimes. Sometimes they would want to do automatic reconciliation also.
Correct.
So that's why the ISO XML 2022 initiative, now even in SIBOS also, it's mostly talked about how the migration had been happening across the globe and how it is benefiting not only the banks but also the customers. So on that context, the remittance B2B space is getting, I would say, properly overhauled and revamped as we speak. So not only the volumes that we intend to grow, but also we intend to give more customer value experience through this particular technology. Now, on the C2C side, consumer side, peer-to-peer remittances is actually driving volumes, right? Because lots of worker remittances are happening on consumer side, peer-to-peer. So that drives not only the volumes, but also for developing markets like Sri Lanka, even Bangladesh, even India. Most of the people are also working outside of those countries, right? So these people who are working outside of those countries have to send money back to their home country for their families. So they would use different corridors. They would use different exchange house solutions to send money back to their homes. So what they do essentially is that, so they've been using very well known payment rails just to send money in. But then again, now the customer demography also changing, right? Now the millennials might be working elsewhere, right? So they want instant settlements. They want instant payments to go to their families or to their loved ones or to their ultimate beneficiaries. As a result, you would have seen since of late lots of global platforms, right? Not only global platforms but also the fintechs are tying up with payment rails. If we consider Revolut, if we consider Remitly, so these apps are heavily being used in markets like Europe, even in US. So enabling this consumer to send money to any part of the world. But one thing still remains the same. The bulk settlement happens through still ISO XML 2022 through the Swift rail. But peer-to-peer individual transactions can happen through outside of Swift rail in not in terms of bulk settlements, but in terms of peer-to-peer remittances, again through their own networks. As a result, even players like MasterCard, Visa also have implemented their own payment channels to send in money. But the good thing is that in terms of what kind of value proposition that you can bring, not only for the business entities but also for the consumers, that would actually set yourself differentiated from the other players. So that is where even banks also now considering what kind of technologies, what kind of technology partnerships that the banks can establish just to give a different experience to their different market segments. It could be business segments, it could be consumer segments. So just to answer your question, entire cross-border remittance game is totally being reshaped now with the ISO XML, with the fintechs tying up, with the customer demography being changing. This entire product revolution is happening as we speak. So maybe as we go along with the conversation, I can make use of some use cases that we also have been adapting in our market to
Correct.
develop and co-create a value proposition, not only to cater the consumer market space on the remittances, but also the business side of it also. So I'm keen to discuss all that also with you.
Right, right. Thanks a lot for that, those details, Pasindu. We also see that while this is growing at a much faster
Yeah,
pace, but the growth is not very static.
correct.
It is being actually impacted or influenced by many factors like the labor market, right? The exchange rate fluctuations
Correct.
and the diaspora politics.
Correct.
So, what, in your opinion, Pasindu, do you see that there? What are the major pressures, global pressures, that are impacting or influencing the ways the remittances are happening these days?
Yeah, that's
Are
again a good
maybe the
question.
opportunities also around
Correct.
it?
So
Yeah.
the global pressures would typically come, all depends on the political architecture and the structure also. But having said that, now, especially on the peer-to-peer remittances, the pressure comes primarily how much actually they want to send back to their home countries, depending on the economies, right? That these individual remitters also working in. Why I'm saying so? Well, it's a known fact that Sri Lanka also went through a crisis situation about 3 years ago. That is when actually the country sovereignty also was challenged. But that is where we wanted more remittances also to come in, because due to COVID, tourism wasn't happening. Tourism would typically bring in a lots of foreign exchange to the country, not only Sri Lanka but to any tourist destination. When there's a tourist inbound happens, you bring in more, you attract more foreign exchange to that country. So due to COVID, due to lockdown, we didn't have it. In addition to the exports, the primary economy was relying on the work remittances. And on top of that, like you clearly mentioned, the diaspora also equally putting pressure. In any case, if the political agenda is not so favorable, that pressure would naturally come.
Correct.
So that is where, Ruby, the customer value proposition also plays a very important role despite of all those challenges, despite of all those pressures. If the peer-to-peer market is looking forward to that proposition, nothing gonna stop them, because end of the day you have still have to send money to your family and friends. Your cross-border trading will still have to happen. If there's an export, there could be a sizable imports also happen, because countries like Sri Lanka, countries like India, when you want to export, you don't find all the materials within that geography. Sometimes you might have to import certain materials, do a value addition, and then do export, right? So even for that also, from a business to business standpoint, you still have to do a considerable amount of imports. Those import settlements also will happen through cross-border remittances. So that's why, despite of any kind of a political backdrop, political challenges, these transactions still have to happen. That is where customer experience and the value proposition matters a lot in terms of driving the volumes, driving the
Done.
values. So I think now developing a cross-border remittances value proposition ideally should address the customer experience. and also should have a clear identification of what is the underlying problem to address. So underlying problems between business to business, between consumer to consumer can be very different. Consumer to consumer, it could be faster remittances, turnaround times. Business to business, not only the turnaround time but also the reconciliation. So those things, if you have identified a problem, it's a question of how do you work around your proposition to address that problem.
Correct.
So I think
Correct.
we can discuss more in detail also in the use
Exactly.
cases, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So now let's dig into the rails. So can you give some idea about the global rails or technology which has been implemented and which has been making a more useful impact on the worker remittances
Certainly
globally?
is. So now I must say that still the shift rail is the king.
Yeah.
End of the
So
day,
yeah.
cross-border shift rail still actually will continue to exist despite of the fintech revolution and all that is happening. But I must also, should mention over here, we all know fintechs initially came to the market saying that we would have banks for the breakfast, and subsequently banks joined with the fintech to share the plate. Well, what they initially mentioned is now we can see in terms of they are eating into the transactional pie of the bank. So they are eating into the transactional pie through this remittances business. Because ultimately, take Remitly, even take Revolut, right? So these guys are operating certain payment wallets. Now, worker remittances also consume these payment rails. Now, these payment rails are happening through sometimes even in blockchain also. But the good thing is that given the ISO XML 2022 standard is established by the SWIFT, the aggregated volume still going through the SWIFT rail. Although the peer-to-peer settlement can happen through these individual rails. Having said that, when it comes to guys like Mastercard or even Visa, they have their own rails. But one thing in common, their bulk settlement still happens through the SWIFT rail.
Okay.
So you see, so given the standards are still driven through ISO XML, there's still hope for the banks, there's still hope for the global standards to exist. But in terms of rails, to answer your question, there are rails that are actually carrying peer-to-peer transactions. Not only peer-to-peer, even right now as we speak, MasterCard, Visa on their own rails, they do support business remittances also. If they wanted to, you can do at a very lower cost business to business settlements using those rails. But there's a catch. The bulk settlement will still happen through SWIFT rail. So still there's a dependency. So as much as we talk about stable coins, cryptocurrencies, end of the day fiats also still exist. So it's a question of that. The old school people with those standards still exist. Maybe in time to come, once actually the regulatory framework getting more adjusted to these new rails, new standards, in addition to the ISO XML standards, chances are that these individual rails also might take over SIF rails. Never know. Maybe in about 5 to 10 years time, we can see that.
Correct. Correct.
I
Correct.
hope I answered your question.
Yeah, sure, sure. It was very helpful. Now, any example of a corridor or a country which has implemented this rails, and you can give your example as to how
Yeah.
you have implemented any such innovations
Yeah.
in a way to assist the worker remittances coming in to
Sure,
Sri Lanka.
sure. I can take a good example over there. It's a live use case also.
Yeah.
So, in the consumer market, peer-to-peer remittances, there was a need for real-time remittances.
Okay.
So, I mean, the pressure was keep building on from the large exchange houses, whether can we co-create a value proposition not only for the remitter but also for the ultimate beneficiaries. So, in Asia, just like in any other geography in Asia, we also in Sri Lanka have real-time payments. So, the real-time payments are primarily for rupee-based payments. So that is actually an ACH payment, automated clearing house, that will happen in 24/7 round the clock. A transaction can take place within about 1 second to 30 seconds window. So that is called SEF. Now, there are some exchange houses that wanted to develop a product during the COVID period where a remitter can send into the ultimate beneficiary in just real time. Now, cross-border remittances doesn't happen in real time as we speak when it comes to peer-to-peer in 2020. Or rather, they had some rails, but it wasn't really functioning. So we had to develop a value proposition for those exchange houses. Needless to say, one of the biggest exchange houses in the globe, where that would allow a remitter to send in money not within 30 seconds window. It should take about 5 to 7 seconds. So on one side we had the real-time ACH in Sri Lanka. Other side we had the bulk USD or whatever designated currencies coming in as a bulk settlement. So we had to develop a product. What is this product? The exchange house can send in designated currencies the aggregated volume separately through the SWIFT rail. But the customer experience is what? Depending on the exchange rate, if it is happening peer to peer, from the exchange house agent, if a remitter visits that agent's desk and that particular remitter would give, this is the X value that I want to send into my home country to the beneficiary, they would only have to give the beneficiary account number, the bank code, and the beneficiary name. That's it. Right? The amount, depending on the rate that the exchange house or the agent might offer to them, a rupee equivalent amount would be settled in real-time basis in Sri Lanka to the beneficiary bank. Right? For that, the exchange house and maybe their local agent in Sri Lanka had to maintain a collection account with the bank. So that gives essentially, for the benefit of the bank, is actually giving more current account or savings account balances. Now, value for the remitter is that remitter doesn't know actually how this exchange is going to take place and all that.
Correct.
Remitter would only know that I can send in money not more than 30 seconds. And they could send it. How? When they initiate the transaction, the exchange rate is blocked in. And then the transaction would take place in Sri Lanka through an API, because we connected that exchange house also depending on the currency types through their global hub of payments. So they initiate an automated SEF payment. They had a one-to-one end-to-end tracking reference for that individual transaction. With the end-to-end tracking reference, they could reconcile individual payments. Also, the transaction would carry what is the exchange rate, what is the ultimate beneficiary value, the transaction value, and also the principal value. Right? If they are buying dollars and sending rupees, the dollar amount, the exchange rate, and the rupee equivalent amount also recorded in that transaction on the primary reference, so that they could do the real-time reconciliation also. And not only that, the remitter would only know, look here, I'm making a 30-second transaction from any part of the world. It could be in dollars, it could be in sterling, it could be in Aussie dollars, it could be in New Zealand dollars, whatever. Now, the beneficiary would receive not only the cash, but also an alert. Maybe an SMS, maybe an email. That option was also given. So for that, what we used was the local ACH rail to do the settlement, the SWIFT rail to do the bulk settlement of those exchange houses in designated currencies, and also the transaction banking channel that we are already using, which is from Nucleus again, to do the automated reconciliation. Automated reconciliation would happen through MT942, MT940, and also we gave direct API connectivity to do individual transaction-wise reconciliation for them to grab that end-to-end transaction reference track. And using that, exchange house could reconcile the bulk of transactions automatically. Individual beneficiaries started receiving SMS alerts or email alerts also on the other hand. And not only that, the money also. So customer experience is that I can send money in real-time basis. Exchange house experience that I can reconcile any amount of money that I've been sending into that designation. Experience for the bank is that they are enjoying current account and savings account balances also with the fees, more stickier CASA, more stickier operating account balances, stickier revenue, right? So we had to secure all these three ends to develop a one whole customer experience, and that itself became a proposition of its own. Now since 2020, that transaction type had been delivering results, and also other exchange houses also now following that. So these are the types of value propositions that the bank should aim for.
Correct.
Right? Using these different rails, how a product association, right, can be coupled with the customer experience, and also customer experience product association coupled with the technology.
Correct.
So that itself would create a whole bunch of new customer experiences, value propositions, and eventually delivering results, not only value to the customer, but also value for these financial companies, so organizations and the banks. So that's a quick story. I'm sorry I can't mention the names of the customers, but those products, those value propositions are now live. And also for a market like Sri Lanka, these products and value propositions are driving the foreign exchange to that nation, to that economy. So during the crisis also, it helped immensely to pump back foreign reserves back to the government treasury also. So we had National Bank being a systematically important bank in Sri Lanka. We played a very important role during the crisis to that geography in terms of providing not only financial assistance but also helping the country to recover from the crisis. So and these are some good stories that we have to share with the globe also right here at SIBOS. So I think that's a very good example that I could elaborate how we use the right payment rails, how we could use the right technology, how we could use the right partnerships to deliver and come up with a value proposition.
That was very interesting and very innovative,
Thanks, Rodri.
for sure. Now, Pasin, we also spoke about the challenges, right?
Yeah.
Some time earlier. So, what, in your opinion, should be the strategic opportunities that banks like you and other banks in Sri Lanka, as well as regulators and the fintechs, should seize from this the entire?
Yeah, so that is actually the collaboration plays a very key role there, Ruby. So why I'm mentioning on the collaboration, you need to have right partners with you, right? So partners can bring in any kind of technology also, but how you should speak that technology language also matters a lot.
Very true.
And partners and the banks or the FIs can talk on the technology and the products, but the consumers won't understand any of those. You need to make sure that you would have the consumer language also. That is how you would take that story to consumer, because for the consumer you are not selling product, you are selling an experience, you are selling a value proposition. So that's where the collaboration between the banks, between the technology partners, between other allies like these payment rail operators, the language has to be a common language,
Very
right?
true.
Which can be understood by all the parties. So the product groups would talk on the product side, technology groups would talk on the technology side, but ultimately to deliver one value proposition that can be understood by many. So I think that's a good learning that I would like to elaborate to other similar players also, because most of the time what I've seen in the technology and the transaction banking space, um, um, the product people would mainly talk on the product side, right? You can't do a very isolated role in the global transaction banking right now. Back in the day, yes, you could, but now it's an ecosystem. Consumers are connected with business operators. It's C2B, B2B, B2C, right? So all these collaborations needs to happen to address that language barrier.
Very
That's how you should actually sell a product. That's how you should even sustain in terms of delivering a product.
Great, great. So what we've heard, Pasindu, that remittance are just not the way of sending money. It's much more than that.
Correct.
Customers' experience, which you spoke about. It is essential to maintain the livelihood, for sure, because that is the purpose.
Correct.
But it is also impacting the national stability and the economic resilience.
Correct.
Right? So very well said that by embracing the best or the better payment rails, the collaborations, the compliance, and taking help of the proven records of very rails.
Correct.
As for example, the most important one which you just shared, the one which you implemented of bringing reducing the time of settlement, that really impacts the way a person feels while remitting money.
True.
The experience plus time, right? So this way, this collaboration will really reimagine the way the worker remittance or the global remittance will actually shape up in the future.
True.
Thank you so much, Pasindu, for all these valuable insights, and looking forward to much more innovations in this area from you. And maybe we can talk on this further in some future connects as
Sure.
well. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ruby, for
Appreciate
the
it.
opportunity. Thanks a lot,
Thank you.
Nucleus. Thank you.